I was able to overclock and push this Jingle miner, which is very similar to a BitAxe Gamma, but in a NerdAxe configuration, to almost 1.4 terahash. And I was able to do so by customizing the BitAxe benchmark. Let me go over some of the details and some of the parameters that I had to change, because just like NerdQX, the benchmark needs time, because this thing takes a minute to ramp up. If I power it down right now, it's going to start off 200 gigahash, 300 gigahash, 600 gigahash, and work its way up to the stock 1.2 that it comes with. But if you play around with the BitAxe benchmark settings, giving it more time to finalize, you can push your Jingle miner a little harder too. Now this is a metal case on here, which is helping a little bit with the heat. Maybe we'll look at improving the thermal solution, or at least replacing thermal paste in the future. But let me show you how I got this up above 1.2 terahash and closer to 1.4. Switching over to the computer, I was mainly focusing on efficiency, because stock, the Jingle miner does push the ASIC voltage to 1.150 or 1150 millivolts. So I was trying to go more for efficiency. We were able to push the clocks up 20 megahertz from stock. 600 was stock, but now it's at 620, pulling down the voltage to about 1.07 is usually where it sits over a 24-hour time frame. But I did have to increase the chip temperature threshold just so the benchmark would complete, especially for the heat here in Florida. Now, something I want to notate is this is just with some basic tuning. You can take it further if you take the Python script and adjust it. Where can you get this Python script? Well, all I did was fork it over under my repository, which I will link it down below. But the original benchmark, the one that I like, is from Mr. V777, which we've talked about on this channel before. So what we're doing, though, is we're combining both the NerdQX, which needs time for the benchmark to finalize, right? When the system reboots or the device reboots, it needs time to complete the benchmark and to register the parameters. But we're also taking parameters from the BitAxe, right? So I already have it pulled up. All you got to do is go to the repo, right? And what I would urge you is to download both the NerdQX and the BitAxe one. And you just want to download and get these Python scripts open up. Now, technically, if you're familiar with GitHub, you can open these inside of GitHub themselves and look at some of the parameters. You just won't be able to adjust it on mine. You would need to fork it and all that good stuff. So just download it, make your life easier. And so once we have it downloaded, notate where that is. You're going to need Python installed on your computer, but it's super easy. If we go to the Windows, Store, and look for Python. I showed you this before in a previous video. We just need to install the latest version. So in this one, we got 3.13. We just got that. Click on it, and you're going to see install. Once it's installed, you're good to go. You're just going to be using command prompt to launch it. I'll show you the command here in a moment. But then you open up the various parameters. In this case, what we have here is, here's the BitAxe benchmark. So I'm going to right click that, open. And I'm going to go back to my folder. Here's I even have Mars Lander because I tried playing around with it. But I have the NerdAxe one under my NerdAxe folder, completely separate. NerdQX, not NerdAxe. But the BitAxe benchmark does work on the NerdAxe. You just, again, need to adjust the parameters. But we're going to go ahead and click this, open. So now I have both of them open. I got the stock BitAxe benchmark one and the NerdQX benchmark one. But I saved it as something different, the Jingle miner, which I'm going to upload, and you could just download and adjust the parameters if you don't feel like doing this yourself. But what we just did is we scroll down to this section here where we set the voltage increment, right? And let's compare. So voltage increment on the NerdQX I have at 10, on the BitAxe 20, on the Jingle miner I set to 5. So we're doing small adjustments. Frequency increment is 10 instead of 25, which is stock on the BitAxe, and 20, which is on the NerdQX. The benchmark time, I left at around 1200. Same thing as the NerdQX, because we want more time for the benchmark to run. But we also want to allow the device or the benchmark to say, hey, after the device reboots, because every time it applies clocks, it reboots, give it more time before you start measuring the parameters. So we're setting the benchmark time up higher. Instead of 10 minutes from the BitAxe up to 20, just like the NerdQX. We set the max temp to 68, which is 66 on the BitAxe. We set the max allowed voltage to 1400 and the max allowed frequency to 1200, which is about the same for the BitAxe, but on the NerdAxe, it's obviously going to be different, right? So you need to understand what your device is doing. Max VRM temps 86. That's pretty much the same for all of these, except for the NerdAxe is 85. Max input voltage, obviously the NerdAxe is getting 11 millivolts, 12 volts, or excuse me, not 11 millivolts, but 11.6 to 12 volts. On the BitAxe, it's only 5 volts, guys. So on the BitAxe, it's 55 or 5.5 volts or 4.8. And the Jingle Miner I just did 4.7. It doesn't go that low to 5.4. Max power, same thing as BitAxe, 40, right? Because these are only 5 volt devices, and the DC plug can only do so much. And then the minimum allowed voltage, add these as constants to configuration section. The minimum allowed voltage is basically the same as the BitAxe. And then more importantly, if we scroll down, we're getting to the point where we need to delay things, right? So the default voltages, we want to make sure we put that back to stock. For the BitAxe, it was, again, 1.15, right, volts, and 500 was the core clock. But on the Jingle Miner, the default frequency is 1.15 and 600. I didn't adjust that here, but that is the default in case you wanted to adjust that. I did adjust it down here, right? So even though I didn't adjust it here, which is technically what this is calling on. So I really should. So let's go ahead and do that. Change that from 5 to 6. So now we have the defaults. Just setting it as it came to you from the manufacturer. And then scrolling further down, we need to worry about the sleep time and the parameters for sleep time. Giving the benchmark plenty of time to get started, get up and running, and kind of go from there. So if we scroll down, we're going to find it. I usually like Control F to help me find things a lot quicker. Let's see here. Time. There it is. I just saw it. Time sleep. Time.sleep. So 300. Allow 300 seconds time for the system to restart and start hashing. So give it time because the NerdAxe, again, will take time to actually load up and start getting up to the hash rate it should be at. 200 gigahash, 300, 400, 600, 700, and then 1.2. Or 1200 gigahash or 1.2 terahash. So just telling the benchmark, give it time before you start registering the benchmark, and then giving it more time as far as the benchmark time, instead of 10 minutes, 20 minutes, to actually get what the parameters are. And once you save that, right, once you save this, which in this case, that's exactly what we're going to do, Control S to save. I know exactly where it is. I'm going to go to that folder that I have it saved under. And I'm going to right click, open in terminal window, right? And we're going to open up a command prompt. You can also CMD and then use the command CD to change directory to the correct directory that you need to go into, but it just needs to be the same directory that you have the script in. And you can see once again, I got the BitAxe hash rate benchmark, then I have a Jingle Miner one, I got a Mars Lander, I can USB disruptor, just playing around. You can't overclock the USB disruptor even though it does use the Axe OS. But yeah, Jingle Miner will be uploaded for you. You guys can go and get that off of the GitHub that I have. And then once we run that, the command is Python space Jingle Miner. So basically it's the name of the file. So if you just left click on this, copy, the only thing we're missing is .py for Python, right? Just to signify that. But the name of the file, .py, and you could change it to whatever. You could say, you know, Jingle Miner 2025.py, whatever the name of the file is. And then the IP address of the machine, your local IP address of the machine, V for voltage, F for frequency. And that is what I set it at, right? I set it at 600 and then 1100 on the 1100 millivolts. And what it came out with as far as my best settings is basically a little bit under 1100 millivolts or 1.07 and 620 megahertz, so 20 megahertz above. It did try the 630, but it seemed that it wasn't the most efficient. Temperatures were running a little bit hotter. Definitely think we could improve the thermal solution on this, even though the metal frame is adding some of that heating capacity. Maybe there's a way that we can tie it into each other. If Jingle Miner hasn't done so already, it might be already. I don't know. We haven't done a teardown, but let me know if you're interested in that. but it just ran through various frequencies, and you could see it outputted the data right here. So if we open this up, this is a JSON file. If we open this up, we can see the same parameters, right? The average temperature, the average hash, the frequency, the core voltage, VRM temps, so on and so forth. Efficiency per joule, or joule per terahash. All that, it's outputted for you right there in that folder. And then you can make some fine-tuning adjustment from that by opening up, again, the original Python file that you have and making your adjustments as so. So I was focused more on efficiency than anything, because this thing was running at, I think, 16.9 to almost 17 joules per terahash. It was doing 20, almost 21 watts, 5.1 volts, and it was constantly at 1.150 or 1.145 volts at only 60 megahertz. So we just made it more efficient. The biggest key for me is in my household, I want to keep an eye on these thermals, all right? The VRM thermals and the ASIC chip temperature thermals. But you might have to give yours, in the JSON file, you might have to give yours in the Python script, a little bit more leeway with the thermals, right? So instead of max temp being 66, maybe push it up a little bit, 68. Don't put it up too high, right? You can look online and see what these chips, which, by the way, the chip in this one is the BM1370. Same thing as the BitAxe Gamma. But just give it a little bit extra breathing room, just so that way it can complete its benchmark instead of failing out on you and not completing the benchmark. But that's how I was able to get the Jingle miner up a little bit higher. I know it was a little bit more detail, and the video was a little bit longer than some of you may have been expecting, but I hoped it helped you out in some form or fashion. Again, just go to my GitHub. I'll link it down in the description. I even have the firmware for the smaller Jingle miners, right? The ESP32, like nerd miner type devices. But if you want the BitAxe benchmark for the Jingle miner, I will have that in one of my repos along with the NerdQX and much more. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. Do me a favor on the way out. Hit that like button. Make sure to get subscribed. Hit notification bell to stay up to date. And check out some of the links in the description to help support the channel and what we do here. You all take care. I'll catch you next one.